Lawmakers this week are picking up the pace as they face a crucial deadline. By Friday night, a bill must have passed in one house to remain alive for the rest of the session. Tonight, a look at some of the key bills that are still waiting for passage as crossover day approaches. House Transportation Chairman Jay Roberts joins us in the studio. How did he fight off a last-minute challenge to pass the billion-dollar transportation funding bill? And what challenges face the bill now that it's in the Senate? Lawmakers starts right now. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Bill Nigut. We're at day 28 of the 2015 legislative session and tick-tock. Not much time left for a lot of big bills to make the crossover day deadline. We're going to take a look tonight at one of the important House bills that did make the deadline, but still faces challenges in the Senate. But up first, Pat St. Clair with tonight's Capitol Report. Hi, Pat.
Good evening, Bill. Well, as you know, things are getting very busy here at the Capitol. The House Transportation Bill passed Thursday. Now it's in the hands of the Senate Transportation Committee and expected to come up this week. Meanwhile, the Senate approved two measures that would set up Governor Deal's education plan and his Opportunity School District for underperforming schools. What will happen with the governor's plan now in the House? House Minority Leader Stacey Abrams was one of the lawmakers who made the trip to New Orleans to look at the Recovery School District there. We sat down with her today for an extended interview.
I think that the governor's intent is good. I appreciate his interest in finding a strong solution to failing schools. I continue to have concerns, as do members of my caucus, about the scope of the solution, about the how we would track not only the urban schools, but the rural schools, questions of discipline that were raised when we were in New Orleans, and just making sure that we've thought through all of the mechanics of this, both the operational side, but also the financial side. And so I look forward to having the bill in the breast of the House so that we can spend more time really evaluating and understanding its implications.
Now, you mentioned Louisiana. You went on the trip with the governor to Louisiana. What were your thoughts about it?
Again, I think that Louisiana is an interesting example of how this type of legislation has been implemented, although I would say that New Orleans is certainly a singular example and not analogous to any other place, given the seismic shift in their population and the composition of their school districts, given that they've for a long time had essentially a dual track with the very strong Catholic school, private school component, as well as the public schools. I would say that they raised some very valid and important concerns about implementation, of the strongest admonition being go slow. And I look forward to taking those learnings and applying it to what we do in the House.
Okay. Now, Senator Ford is talking about an education bill that basically provides grants for schools to have a community-based approach to the schools. Do you have some comments on that? What do you think about that?
I think any opportunity we have to expand community engagement in schools and to expand the access of services to particularly our most economically disadvantaged children, that's an important step for us to take.
Let's move on to transportation. That's another big bill. So what is the Democratic caucus in the House? What are your thoughts about the transportation bill as it stands now?
We strongly supported the final version of the bill that left the House. It, I believe, reflected the best thinking that we had, which is that we have to increase revenue. It is insufficient to talk about needs of transportation without putting money in place. It recognized for the first time the state's responsibility towards transit. But more than that, what I think it signals is a willingness to not hold cities and counties and schools accountable for what is a state responsibility, which is transportation. And so I think the final version is an important step towards getting to a solid bill that not only addresses roads and bridges, but roads, bridges, and transit, which I think create a holistic transportation plan in the state of Georgia.
How do you feel that, as far as power brokers, the Democrats, your position is now, as far as, do you feel like you may have the final say on some of this legislation?
I think that the role that we play as the minority party is threefold. One is to cooperate where we can. So find places of commonality, work together with the majority to get things done, and I think we did that effectively with transportation. We also have the responsibility to be competitive, to say these are things we do not think make sense and to push back against them. And that's one of the places that we will certainly evaluate bills like the Religious Freedom Bill and others to make certain that bad ideas do not cross the finish line, or at least, if they do cross, that they're limping and not sprinting. And then third, our job is accountability, to make sure that the public understands what we do here at the Capitol, both on the majority and the minority side. And I think we do an effective job of raising that awareness.
We will have more from Representative Abrams a little later in tonight's program. Well, after years of trying, the state of Georgia is one step closer to legalizing the sale of most fireworks here. The fireworks bill passed in the House today on a vote of 119 to 49, but some are concerned about local control.
Is it not true that I have a concern for this bill as it relates to various counties or cities that may not want to sell fireworks, but does this not take away local control and actually mandates that a person can pop up and put a stand downtown Atlanta if they want to?
I don't believe that they can pop up and put a stand anywhere. I actually disagree with you on that. I do believe that the bill does not allow for local governments to prevent the sale of fireworks within a jurisdiction. I do believe that zoning laws come into play, but the bill does not allow them to go in and prevent sales from any jurisdiction.
Under HB 110, you'd have to be at least 18 years old to buy fireworks, and a permit would be required to sell them, but online sales are prohibited. The bill now goes on to the Senate for consideration. Finally tonight, organizers of Moral Monday joined forces with women's groups to protest HB 194, a bill that would limit early voting in Georgia. Supporters chanted, "Keep your hands off early voting." They used the example of the 50th anniversary of Selma from this weekend to argue why protecting voter rights is important. HB 194 would cut the number of early voting days in Georgia from 21 down to 12. However, it would still allow voting on Sundays. The bill was approved by a House committee, but so far it is not scheduled to come to the House floor for a vote. Stay tuned. That's it for now, Bill. We will be back in a few minutes with more of our extended interview with Stacey Abrams. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Pat. We'll see you later in the show. Last Thursday, the House floor turned into the OK Corral, thanks to a showdown of fairly dramatic proportions over Governor Deal's proposed transportation bill. Joining me with details tonight, the man who was the author of that bill, Representative Jay Roberts from R-Ocilla. He's Republican chair of the House Transportation Committee and sponsor of HB 170. And Jim Galloway, the longtime political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. His blog, Political Insider at AJC.com, is must-reading for anyone interested in state and local government. Thank you both for being here. Representative Roberts, there were some forces that looked like they were going to try to align against you. From the very start, you and other leaders in the House had said, we need at least $1 billion to fix our roads and infrastructure. And for a while, it looked like there were some pretty formidable forces starting to line up to try to reduce that a bit. In the last hours before the vote, the majority leader, Leader O'Neill, came along with an amendment that would have reduced the amount of the excise tax, and it would have cost you probably maybe as much as, $600 or $500 million off the
Somewhere
total?
Around that range.
The House went for your bill. They didn't get worried by Grover Norquist, who said they were voting for a tax increase. They resisted the temptation from others that they would lose in their election campaigns for voting for what some perceive as a tax increase. How did you make that happen?
You know, I think that, well, one, the majority leader has a job to do, and his job is to look after the caucus and to try to put forth what he believes is the best agenda for him, and I respect him for that. You know, but I believe that the body at the end of the day realized that the need was there. They realized that we did not need to try to get to $1 billion, and I think that that was the message that they were sending with that vote.
Jim, you had a terrific column yesterday in which you compared the Speaker of the U.S. House, Speaker Boehner, to David Ralston, who, with Jay Roberts, stood firm and insisted we needed to move forward on this, despite some really loud conservative voices.
Right. I thought the one thing, the first principle was that David Ralston is the leader of Republicans in the House, but he's not their prisoner. And he did move on this. He allowed a rebellion to take place, and you were part of it, but he had it take place in the open, not behind caucus doors, and on the House floor where Democrats could have their say too. There was one amendment there that was, you'd have to call it an anti-transit amendment by Ed Setzler Vackworth. They came within 3 votes of passing. It was a near thing. This was not a staged display. This was, I got the impression that the tension was very real.
It was, but you're right. I mean, it was out in the open, and I think it gave everybody an opportunity to make sure that their vote was counted. And you know, at the end of the day with the bill, I mean, you had everybody, I think, realizes that there was a need. The question was, how do we get to that need?
Right. I've got one question here. Is one thing you didn't mention was that you and Majority Leader O'Neill are roommates in an apartment. You had to have some fairly interesting conversations in the evening.
You know, we have had some good spirited conversations over the last month or so, but you know, there again, it goes back to he has a job to do. He knew up front that I was opposed to the amendment and that I was going to object, but I also respected his place, and as Majority Leader, that he had to do what he felt was right and what the leadership had discussed.
But this passes in a very conservative state like Georgia. You'd have to say this passes as a profile in courage. People stood up and said, no, 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 we need every bit of the revenue, $1 billion plus, to make this work.
There are quite a few Republican lawmakers who are going to be tested in primaries in the next cycle. And I will tell you, you're already seeing the Metro Chamber and the Georgia Chamber admit that, yes, this is so, and they're kind of ginning up the campaign contributions already to protect them.
Go ahead. You want to comment on that?
No, I mean, I believe, though, that at the end of the day, we're sitting up here to do a job. And the question is, do you want to try to be the politician, or do you want to be the statesman? Now, some just philosophically disagree with what we were doing, and that's okay. But I believe this was an issue that we were sent up here to lead on. As prevalent when you look at the Democrats and Republicans working together, transportation is not a partisan issue. I mean, transportation is something that affects everybody equally, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, whatever it may be. And I think that we saw that on the floor last night.
All right, so you've now taken this beautiful baby that you have birthed and you have put it in the hands of the state Senate, where it's gone after some questions to Tommy Williams in the Transportation Committee over there. And there's been some talk that Tommy Williams may see a very different way for getting the funding, that he doesn't necessarily like the excise tax that you have used to get to $1 billion plus. What are you hearing, and how do you think this is going to play out?
You know, as I stated on the floor the other day, and I've said throughout this process, I can't legislate according to what the Senate's going to do. I've got to try to put together the best plan that I believe.
Sure, but you're going to have to reach an agreement down the road. I am going to have to reach an agreement with them, but it's now in their hands, and I'm sure that they have their own feelings of how we get there. And, you know, I respect that. That's part of the process. But at the end of the day, I think you'll see us probably come together and reach an agreement. But you know, we have had this bill. Now we passed it in the 28th day. It's something that we've worked hard on. We've reached a lot of consensus, and we started at one point, and we kept listening to the concerns, and I believe that we presented a good piece of legislation as we passed it out of the House.
I will tell you, the one thing that in the Senate that is going to be the main test is whether Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle and Senate President Pro Tem David Schaefer choose to follow the House model and allow full-blooded debate and bring in Democrats to help make the deal.
If they rebel against the excise tax, if they come up with a new funding formula, they pass it, this goes to conference committee, you really, in a way, are throwing everything up for grabs, aren't you? You've got your House members on board with one plan. If there's a dramatically different plan from the Senate, that could cause significant trouble down the road, yes?
It could. I mean, at the end of the day, we realize the needs there. We'll look at what they come up with, and then it'll be to the point to whether we can come to an agreement. Then you have to go back and sell it again to our caucus members and to the members of our body. And I think that's going to be tough when you've had this much vested interest in it. But this is a process.
Okay. All right. We need to ask him one last question, and then we got to go to our next story. But your fireworks bill passed by a pretty big margin today. It's going over to the Senate. Does the Senate seem to be amenable to allowing legal fireworks in Georgia?
I believe that the Senate will be amenable to it. The chairman of the Senate Rules Committee and I have worked together on this piece of legislation now for a couple of years. And I was glad to see that it passed out in the House today, and I believe they'll move it forward.
I don't admit biases very often, but I have to say I love the idea of shooting off fireworks, so it'll be interesting to see how the Senate treats it.
Yeah, well, I've kind of had two bills that's kind of had a little bit of an explosion here for the last
right. Representative Jay Roberts, thank you so much for coming in tonight. Stick with us for just a minute, if you will. Today, the House passed a bill honoring one of Governor Deal's executive orders. Supporters say the bill is good for Georgia tree farmers, but opponents say it limits the state's ability to use sustainable products. Representative Mike Chiokas represented the bill.
This House bill ensures that Georgia lumber is used in state buildings paid for by Georgia citizens. The basic principle here is that Georgia-grown products, including wood and wood fiber, should not be locked out of any markets in this state, especially those markets that are funded by the Georgia taxpayers.
Although I strongly believe in supporting Georgia products, whether they're forestry or any other product, I don't think it's the right thing policy-wise for us to say we're going to support forestry over all the other people that are involved in the Green Building Initiative.
The measure passed, and it now goes on to the Senate. Still ahead, tonight on Lawmakers, Senator Nan Orrock joins us to talk about International Women's Day, the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, and why civil rights activists say there's still a lot of work to do across America. We'll be right back.
Chamber of Commerce is celebrating 100 years of leadership and partnerships with elected officials, local chambers, and companies from across Georgia that have contributed to building a better state of business. Learn more at gachamber.com.
This is 88.5 FM, Atlanta's news source for your news and information.
Good morning. Let's start the conversation. What's on your mind, Atlanta? We want to hear from you.
The news and information you've been looking for is here on 88.5.
From Peachtree City to Piedmont Park, from Norcross to Decatur, GPB Atlanta is the source for stories from your community.
All news, all information, all day.
It's time to celebrate 10 years of Celtic Woman with the Festival of Fan Favorites. Remember the first time you were swept away by the spellbinding songs, the mesmerizing voices, and the dazzling dances. Join us for a celebration of classic Celtic Woman performances. Revisit the Emerald Isle and relive the most magical moments that have touched your heart and lifted your spirit for the last 10 years.
Thursday at 9 on GPB.
Tomorrow, March 10th, would have been the 91st birthday of Thomas Bailey Murphy, perhaps the best-known legislator of our time, or most infamous, depending on your politics. Murphy, a Democrat who hailed from Bremen, Georgia, was first elected to the State House in 1961. In 1973, he became Speaker of the House, a position he held with a sharp tongue and an iron fist for 28 years. Through the administrations of Jimmy Carter, George Busbee, Joe Frank Harris, Zell Miller, and Roy Barnes. Murphy lost his seat in 2002 and died 5 years later, but his legacy lives on at the Gold Dome. Welcome back to Lawmakers. Senator Nan Orrock is joining us for the second half of our show tonight. And of course, staying with us ace political reporter for the AJC, Jim Galloway. I love that Lisa Clark, our show writer, calls you ace political reporter.
Ace.
You are. Senator Orrock, it's really nice to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much for being here. International Day of the Woman, or International Women's Day today. What does that mean?
Well, it's celebrated around the world, and I've frankly seen more talk about it out in the social media than I have in past years. Women are working hard to come into their own, and there's a UN resolution to that effect. When women are at the peace tables, they resolve conflict. We are working to put women at the power tables.
What's the agenda? I mean, women are still being paid less than men for for similar jobs, and that's certainly got to be a big part of what you're looking at. Yes,
that's right. And we have slow growth on bringing women into the legislative chambers. We just hit the 100 mark in the U.S. Congress. That was a milestone, but I think they say it's another century before we'd catch up if we continue at this slow rate of growth. There were 12% when I came into the legislature, and now females nationally in state legislatures are 24%. We are not where we need to be.
Well, it's very similar to Congress, and the Georgia legislature are similar in that you do have plenty of women, but not a whole lot of women in positions of power.
Yeah. Well, we don't have plenty of women. We're nowhere near half of the chamber. We've grown. We've maybe doubled our numbers from when I first went in. And yes, it continues to be a question of women in power. Now, we have our Democratic leader in the House, Stacey Abrams. You heard from her tonight. We have Jan Jones on the Senate side, but we don't have women chairing the major heavy lift committees.
So one of your causes is let's get more women into elected office to make the kind of changes that you think women would support. Tell me about Selma this weekend.
Selma was momentous. 50 years ago, I was on a college campus in Virginia, and we had the first political rally that campus had ever had in support of the Selma marchers and the Selma to Montgomery March. It was terrific to go back and to be with loads of people from Atlanta, 80 or 100,000 people from around the country, and a very stirring address from North Carolina pastor Reverend Barber around let's commemorate the incredible thing that happened here 50 years ago, but let's commit ourselves to fight for voting rights today. And we're doing that in the Georgia General Assembly, quite frankly.
We've got one voting bill right now that's still alive, HB 194.
That's right.
Before it's passed out of committee, it's sat in rules for 2-3 weeks now by Mark Hamilton, hasn't been called. What are you hearing about that?
It's teed up, and there are going to be a whole lot of bills that roll out here in the next a day or two, as we know, because Friday's the last day a bill can come out of a chamber, right? The crossover day, that's right, and still be possibly passed. So we're watching it with great alarm. It again cuts into early voting days. It narrows down access to the ballot. And it's kind of the next generation of the voter identification bills.
The bill calls for uniform Sunday voting across the state, but reduces the number of early voting dates by at least, I think, a dozen days or something, right?
A week. It reduces it by a week. But actually, it cuts in half Sunday or Saturday hours, and it gives a locality the choice of offering Sunday or Saturday voting.
But not both. You can't do both.
That's right. You can't do both. So it's restrictive. It's restrictive. It's narrowing down access to the ballot. And, half the people, the votes cast in the last election, they tell me, were cast in the early vote days. And so there's obviously a pent-up desire for expanding. 3 states in the country have where they mail you the ballot to your house. And I'd love to see us go in that direction. But it's been documented around the country. There's bills being introduced everywhere to narrow access to the ballot.
At the federal level, a lot of talk this weekend in Selma about the fact the Supreme Court has thrown out a very important provision of the Voting Rights Act, which we're going to celebrate that 50th anniversary in a few months. What are your thoughts on restoring some aspect of that pre-clearance by southern states with the Justice Department?
It's desperately needed. You can see year after year after year where challenges where clearance by the Justice Department has been very important at stopping bills that go in the wrong direction on access to the ballot. And that was a huge blow that the Supreme Court knocked that section out. And the marchers from Selma are rallying in Washington, and they're going to take it into the halls of Congress. That was talked about. The 25th of March, I think, is the next target deadline. But this movement is going to Washington. There was a lot of young people in Selma that I think bespeak the fact that young people are on the move again. And we were young in the 60s when these battles were
We're
waged.
still young, Nan.
Well, we are young at heart, absolutely. But there's a youth voice on these issues.
Nan Orrock, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Bill. Appreciate it.
We're going to go back now to Pat St. Clair at the Capitol. She has more with Representative Stacey Abrams.
Well, thank you, Bill. As we know, Stacey Abrams is a respected lawmaker and even a deal maker here at the Capitol. But she also has a very creative side as a successful romance novelist. And that's why she is tonight's person of interest.
Well, I've always loved writing, and I wanted to write actually a spy novel. I was in my third year of law school, wanted to write an espionage novel, but had some friends who were in publishing who said, there aren't espionage novels by or about women. And I thought, well, that can't be true. And then I realized most of the espionage novels that I'd read were actually written as romance novels. And so, based on my long history with General Hospital and Anna Devane and Robert Scorpio, I decided I would kill all the people I planned to kill in the espionage novel, but make my spies fall in love at the end. And it became a romance novel. Why are you so driven? What in your life got you to this point that you are so accomplished and so driven? I fundamentally believe that if you want something to be done, your obligation is to do it, and that there's very little excuse for not trying. I grew up with parents who are from southern Mississippi, who both grew up in very deep poverty, but who managed not only to lift themselves up, and lift their family up, but also lift up their community. I watched my parents go back to graduate school at the age of 40. They went together. They had 6 kids in tow. My older sister had just started college, but the rest of us were in elementary school, high school, or junior high school. And so it's hard in our family to claim that you don't have time to do something, because when you've watched your parents go to school full-time, work full-time, and raise 6 children, excuses are very hard to rationalize. But I think more than that, for me, it's that my parents never told us there were things we couldn't do. And so for me, if I think it's something that should be done, it's my job to try it. If I fail, then it's my job to see if there's another way to get it done.
Yeah. And you must be very organized, too.
I am deeply anal retentive in some ways.
Well, so what's next for you?
Well, my job is to make sure that the House Minority Caucus becomes the House Majority Caucus, and I will continue to work to make that happen. And in the interim, my job is to represent my constituents and represent the needs of the state of Georgia. I am deeply privileged to have this job. I'm lucky that my caucus has trusted me with this responsibility. And so for me, the eye is on making sure that every year and every day we do the best work that we can.
Bill, she writes under the name of Selena Montgomery, and I have to tell you, I'm reading one of her books right now called Secrets and Lies. It is so good. I can't wait to get home and finish it.
All right, Pat, your book report is due on April 2nd, Sine Die Day. We expect it to be on time.
You'll have it.
Thanks a lot. First today in the state Senate, a freshman senator introduces his first bill, and another freshman steps up to amend it. Needless to say, both were roasted by their fellow senators.
Is this your first piece of legislation? I thought it was.
This is the first bill. We're fixing to find out just how hungry everyone is.
Senator, I sort of pride myself in being able to speak a couple of other languages, and in some of those languages I understand dialects, but I can't really say that I understand the dialect of the 8th district. But I was just curious, do you speak the 8th district dialect?
Not very well, no, sir.
So, Senator, you're trying to amend this bill when you have no knowledge of the language?
I know what I read. I don't know what I heard.
Well, day 28 of the 2015 legislative session is now a wrap. Lawmakers will meet in session on Wednesday. We'll be here at our usual time to bring you the news and everything that happens. In the meantime, stay in touch with us on social media, or email us at lawmakers@gpb.org. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great evening. We'll see you on Wednesday.
This is a GPB original production.